Hey everyone, it's Christopher Swan, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Your Journey. Each week, I get the amazing opportunity to chat with people that love what they do in life. They understand their passions. Maybe it's a career path or the social impact that they're making. It's kind of like they're following their North Star. Even though their story may change, they understand that they're on their journey every day. On the show this week, I chat with recording artist Color Theory, better known to his friends and family as Brian Hazard. Color Theory is well known online, especially with fans of 80s synth pop and EDM. For the folks that don't know, that's electronic dance music. He's an independent artist successfully releasing 9 albums and gathering millions of followers. As if that wasn't enough, Brian also runs an audio mastering company where he uses his mastering skills to make other artists sound amazing. In our conversation, we discuss Brian's musical career, how he balances his time as a recording artist, running a mastering company, spending time with his family, and still getting it all done. We also talk about using social media as an artist, what's next for Color Theory, advice for artists just starting out, and a practice of deep work, and a lot more. I love Brian's level-headed approach. You can be creative and still focus on a full and balanced life. This was a lot of fun for me as I've been a fan of Color Theory for a while now. It was great to get a glimpse behind the scenes of the music and to meet Brian. Okay, here's our conversation. Brian, it's so good that we are catching up now that your new album is out. So I'm really excited that we're having the interview today and discussing obviously your background, but also perfect timing for your album.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. You know, you've known this because I've told you this before, but I've been a fan of yours for quite a few years when I discovered you on Twitter. So I'm super eager about understanding like your space with music, how you started. And, you know, the folks that are listening had just heard an intro I did about you, but let me do a little introduction still. So Color Theory, that's really Brian Hazard, and he's online very much known as Color Theory, the recording artist. So he's also the head mastering engineer, and really you're the owner of, is it Resonance Mastering?
Correct, Resonance. Yeah, it's just me. It's a one-man business.
You know, you'd never know by online, though. That's the beautiful thing. You look at it, you're like, this powerhouse mastering organization in Southern California. But so it's great. So you have these kind of dual rules. You're this recording artist, really well known online, and you have this mastering business. And for me, I mean, it's always been Color Theory. And then when I started to get to know you more, I was like, oh, there's a real person behind this band. Yeah. So that's really great. So that's the story of a little bit of, give people color of who you are. So we're going to dive into, your world, what this all looks like. So let me stop rambling on and start asking you some questions. Let's talk about Color Theory. You had, I believe you're at 9 albums because your latest just released, which is Adjustments. And that was what? 3 weeks or more ago?
Yeah, it was the end of May, the 27th. So, and yeah, lucky number 9. And in the back of my head, because I have my degree in music and studied all this stuff, there are a lot of famous composers. Of course, I'm no Beethoven, but they all make it to 9 and then they die. And so
that's so dark.
Yeah, it kind of looms over me. So I'll be really. And this time, if I don't make it to 10, it may not be because I die. It may be because the album format has died. So we'll have to see.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to say, hurry, release something else so you can get past 9. But you know what?
Yeah.
You're right about that because it's... Well, let me ask a question about that because you've been in the music industry for so long. So you've seen this trajectory or at least the history of what we're doing, So when you say album format, I assume you mean like, oh, an album has so many songs on it and it usually has a theme and things like that. Is that what you are referring to?
Yeah, it seems like the smart way to do it now is instead of, disappearing for 2 years and going to another country and recording an album with some foreign producer and all that. And then coming back with, your lead single and 3 months later releasing the album. It seems like the smart money is on engaging with your fans through the entire process and coming up with new content, preferably like once a month. I would love to be able to do
Mm.
that. So every month you've got a new song, and really that's the event. Um, and the album becomes almost an afterthought because sure, you could release an album then that puts together a lot of those songs, or maybe has some that people didn't hear, but um, the focus is really kind of the day to day. We're getting down to the Snapchat level, right?
Oh,
Where
yeah.
that's really where I think music promotion and access to the artist. Because when I started, you really had to have a label to be taken seriously. Number one, but I remember my making my website, and I felt awkward writing about myself in the third person, but that's how it was done. You would never say, "Hi, I'm Brian, and this is my song," because that would just strike everyone as totally amateur.
Yeah.
Um, but right now, that's turned completely around. We don't need to hear from we're not aware of what label people are on anymore. It's about them and their daily lives, and you see them in the cab going to an interview and all that stuff. So anyway, I think that's where the kind of the smart money is at as far as promotion. I'm not there yet, but nor am I putting out a song a month. But
Well,
yeah.
I'm curious that you say that because I could see all that being true. Yeah, like it keeps you fresh, and because I think in this day and age where things are so much online, you're right. Going away 2 years, and doing that sort of thing, you might lose this traction or whatnot. I'm curious though, if we were to switch that, if that's really like the new world of releasing music and participating. The one thing I wonder about is what I've always grown to really love and enjoy is when an album is released, there is this connection and this theme and this like journey that I get from the artist because it's a lot of times, music is reflective of that individual and what they've been going through.
Mhm.
Even in the last couple of years, people have been still doing that. Do you think that we'll lose that sort of experience or that connection to understanding what's been happening with that artist if we kind of go month to month, or will it just be exposed differently?
Well, I mean, yeah, you'll see what's happening month to month, and so there's kind of a linear journey there if you choose to take that journey with the artist. So I think it's the same idea. It's just happening on a smaller scale. So as for the album itself, there's kind of two approaches, right? There's kind of the Beyonce disappearing, and now she's got an album that has a very strong theme, throughout,
Yeah.
and I think is an amazing artistic statement. From what I've read, I haven't even heard it, but anyway, it certainly has made that kind of impact, as a statement. So that's one approach versus like the Katy Perry. Here are 15 singles
Mm,
written by different people that don't really,
you're right.
depending on how you line them up, they really have contradictory, statements or advice, or they don't even paint a picture of one person's life necessarily because of all the apparent contradictions. Um, I don't know which is necessary. I mean, for me, obviously, I feel the same as you do that I would rather have an album that stands alone as a unit and as a statement of some coherent idea. But I'm not sure that the market. I hate using that word, gosh, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but it's
It,
true.
it doesn't respond to that, or they've forgotten about you by the time you've done that, and now nobody cares.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny when you said that and you mentioned the Katy Perry, because really, when you said it, I was like, well, actually, there's nothing wrong with that. But
Yeah,
it's a really different experience, and I didn't think of it that way. Clearly, I'm looking to this deeper side, and I don't know if it's every artist that I think about this like storytelling and this kind of connected, longer experience that they pull together. But I think there are specific artists that I really follow that I am on the journey of them because I've kind of made this commitment, and then there's other people I'm like, oh, great single, and then I move on. So
yeah.
I think you're right. Probably some storytelling there. I was curious because you being in the industry for so long, or just producing music and it being a craft, that you would have a take on that. I'd love to back up just a little bit too before we,
Sure.
get into all this stuff, which is wonderful because I'm more curious about it. Could you also just help us understand a little bit more? Because I don't want to do it injustice, but maybe describe your music and your original influence to creating this kind of music.
Well, okay, so my music, the tagline is 80s synth pop plus EDM plus classical piano, which sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? But so I grew up with Depeche Mode being my number one influence, and every other electronic band that I liked and I got into. I got into Pet Shop Boys and Erasure and you name it. I
Yeah.
mean, the whole lineup and Soft Cell and I loved them all for their own reasons, but only Depeche Mode created this sonic universe that I just had no idea how they do it. I would say to this day I have a much better idea, but that was what always puzzled me. Like I couldn't identify, like, is it a synth? Is it a sample? Like, where are they getting? And is this three sounds blended together? Like, I just don't know. I don't know how they do it. And so that always intrigued me. And so I think I got into making synth pop, number one, because of Depeche Mode and that influence on me. But number two, because I was a pianist, and doing synthesizer music allowed me to do everything myself. Because, I'd been in a couple bands. It wasn't, jamming and performing weren't really interesting to me. I was never, like, a lot of my keyboardist kind of friends were into, Keith Emerson and kind of this like virtuosity aspect that is kind of antithetical to Depeche Mode. If you think of, say, Everything Counts and this little da 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 little, two notes going back and forth thing. I mean, it's completely the opposite of, Chick Corea or Emerson or those kind of things where it's just really about displaying this raw ability. And so that side of being a musician never really appealed to me that much. It was always about, making something with that kind of amazing atmosphere, that sonic universe like Depeche Mode did. And so, being able to work alone, I guess, was part of that, because working in a band, it was always about the performing and the gigging and the playing and the, and the compromise and, so that's kind of where I ended up where I am. And a lot of, and then I got into mastering all those acts as well. So that was kind of a wonderful community around that. And a lot of the bands would stick to their kind of 80s sound. They were kind of purists and they wanted to always use old hardware, and so their recordings could have been made, a decade or two ago, but that didn't interest me as much. Like I've always tried to stay fresh and listen to new music. And that's why the EDM thing kind of came into my music. Just some elements of it. I got into Deadmau5 and some of the earlier stuff. And it wasn't a huge, I mean, Zed produces everything now, but some of I don't, sounds like a hipster when I say the early stuff, doesn't it? Like it's,
No, I didn't really get that, but okay. Yeah.
I did. Well, I just don't care for the last album, I guess, is all it comes down to. But there were just a few tracks that really caught my attention. And it's just, and what was kind of a breakthrough about that for me is that it was instrumental music. Because I've always been drawn to the storytelling and the songwriting. And so to be lured into, spending a lot of time listening to purely instrumental music, that hadn't really happened since college, and listening to piano repertoire that I would aspire to play. So I incorporated some elements of EDM into my music. And of course, now that the album is done, I've really am not finding myself listening to EDM anymore. I'm just kind of bored with it. So we'll see where it goes. And then of course the classical piano, because that's what I studied and trained to be able to basically be a concert pianist. Not that I would ever be at that level or ever have the interest in doing that, but that's if I had wanted to be a concert pianist, that would have been the schooling that I would have gone through. So,
well, you hit on just a moment. I'd love to ask this question about, yeah, so you're not listening really to EDM anymore, and we know that tastes change. So, where do you think you're headed now as you start to evolve and you're even thinking, hey, I may do something month to month, or I may do something more often versus this album format. As you think about that and think about your taste in music, what do you think is kind of the new angle or influence that you'll have in your music?
that's a good question. So I always feel like, wow, I never listen to music. Like, that's messed up. Why? I don't listen to music I should say for pleasure, because if I'm mastering and mixing for other people and I'm going to do that a few hours in the day, well, then those hours that I'm not doing that, I want to be resting my ears. So there's the kind of the logistical element where I don't end up listening to music, but then also, driving around, I'm thinking about where other people listen to music, driving around the car. I've always got the kids and they complain and they start making noise and I can't really listen or run. I run, 40, 50, 60 miles a week. You'd think, wow, perfect. I'll listen to music. Most people do, but I don't, there's a meditative quality to running that I really want to be connected to what I'm doing. And I feel like the music, I don't know. I just don't enjoy it.
It's like it gets in the way of that connection that you're trying to have.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
It definitely does. And then there's just technical problems too, that, sound quality, earbuds slipping out, wind, because I'm used to listening to music in the studio all day. So I'm used to it sounding good. So my question to myself is, do I really need to keep beating myself up about not listening to music, or do I just make music and just, see what happens and just go with that and not feel the need to, pull from influences or even contribute to the conversation of where music is going right now? Is that important? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's curious. Like, I can see both sides of that equation, really, or what you're trying to think through. Like, there is no requirement. You don't need to be influenced by what's current. Like, does that really matter? Not everybody wants to be a current influence pop star or whatever. Like, that doesn't really matter. I think it's interesting that, because if you're creating something on your own, because you are obviously hearing music as you're mastering others, but it's not music that you're like, oh, let me go choose this thing that I really love or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm almost wondering that if because you're not influenced so much by the external folks, that you are maybe a little bit more of a pure journey of, let me just discover things, let me experiment and try. So I can see how that could be kind of interesting. I think many of us in the world are influenced by things around us.
Right.
So that makes me think and wonder, are you influenced by things that are not, or are you influenced by things that aren't music that would maybe, seep into what you're thinking about, like even just the storylines, things like that?
Well, I mean, the honest answer is, of course, we're influenced by all the inputs that come to us. But I would say no. I mean, it's not like I read a book and then write a song from a character's viewpoint. But I will say another influence would be, my new toy, that Rowley Seaboard Rise. Right. So it's a new type of instrument, and so that allows me to do things in a different way, and also somewhat obligates me to use it and to because we've talked about before about my wanting to have some more kind of video content and want to share what I'm doing more with fans. But me sitting at a computer by itself is not very interesting. But performing on that instrument, I would say, is very much so. And so that's an influence too.
Yeah, I didn't think of it
Yeah.
that way. You're right. And I absolutely love that instrument, even though I don't like it's because I know there's a different style to use it. And we're going to link to it when we push out your interview as well, because it's so cool and it's very interesting to watch you play and see what it does. It almost
Yeah.
feels like it's alive to me.
It does, yeah, because it's got all these other dimensions that you don't get from playing a piano. So it's a lot of fun. But I have a long way to go there too. I mean, just to, it's interesting. I could spend a couple hours a day just learning new toys. And the problem is it's hard, there's always the lure of the latest toy, and then you're just in a constant learning state and you never master any of those tools. And so I mean, that's something that most musicians, I think, deal with today because the toys are so cheap compared to what they used to be. And there's always some new, even if it's just, samples and people want to have a sample collection, that's like curating a record collection. You've got to organize it. And so you might buy a set with 10,000 samples and end up using like 6 on a song before you've got a new set of samples. So,
Wow.
yeah, there are a lot of dimensions, even just within the musical realm, that can be inspiring or crippling because the choices are so overwhelming.
It makes me wonder, as you've been in this, like I've mentioned this before, you've been in this industry for such a long time, producing albums and music. As you're learning new toys or, different things that you're trying to incorporate into, what you're doing, if it's samples or whatever, how do you stay focused? Like, what's that as a musician, as somebody, as a recording artist who is like, I want to learn new things, but I also want to produce music. Like, what's your trick or lever that helps you stay focused to produce music while learning new skills in your practice?
See, that's a great question because that is exactly my concern right now. I don't want to say focus because I guess that's redundant. We're talking about focus, but my my little rule book is always changing about how I keep on task, and because I work at home too, there's always alone. There's nobody with a whip standing over my shoulder. It's always tough to to do that and to not be lured by the distractions of the internet.
Yeah.
So I will say that is always changing. I don't know if I could spend 10 minutes talking about my current day-to-day structure, but I guess that's even in flux. But my focus right now is on the concept of deep work. I read about it, an article by Sam Malta on EDM prod. He's got a great resource blog with all sorts of really good advice for producers. And him and another friend, Booty, I'm going to say Booty's last. It's Voogt, and he's in Scandinavian region over there. I'm sure I can't pronounce it, but he runs Heroic Records, and his writings and stuff have been very helpful and inspiring. And he writes even about social media and things like that. That anyway, they are both tracking what they call their deep work publicly on a Google Doc. And so it's there for everyone to see. And so the concept is that your deep work is the stuff that requires intense concentration and intense focus, and it can't be reproduced by others, and ultimately is what you are doing to bring value into the world. So, I would think for me, that is making music. For them, it could be creating a promotion plan for an artist, or they produce music as well, writing a blog post, whatever it is. But the really important stuff, and the other stuff, answering emails, logistics, that's kind of the shallow work. So the idea is you you get in a regular schedule with this deep work, you put it on your calendar, and you cut yourself off from the internet, any source of interruption, and you endure the boredom that should naturally come as a byproduct of that intense focus. And that basically you over time are able to train your brain to concentrate more deeply for a longer period of time. So that's kind of where I'm at. And what I've realized is that over the past maybe 4 or 5 months, I have done very little deep work. It's all been, even mastering, as wonderful as it is not deep work, because I can't work for an hour without needing a break for my ears. I can put in 40 minutes, and that's easy for me. That it's like watching TV. Like, you don't have to think about, like, oh, focus, concentrate. Yeah. I mean, the mastering is like that for me. I'm very focused on the sound, and it just kind of happens. I don't need to guide it. But when it comes time to sit down and make a track, I mean, that's tough. That's really hard out of nothing. I mean, mixing the track, that's another story. The technical stuff, that's all good. I could do that all day. But yeah, the creation stuff. And so, so that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm tweaking my day to day to try to make that happen. I mean, and cutting out the stuff that's not important. Like, for example, I've gone back to I don't even look at my Twitter direct mentions anymore. The DMs, like I have hundreds of those every day. Yeah. 95% are spam.
Of course.
I'm not going to deal with it anymore. It's just, I changed my profile to say, if it's important, email me. And so, yeah.
Well, I wonder if this practice, and that all makes sense. This practice to me also makes me think like even like you just said, you haven't spent a lot of time in this deep work lately in the last few months, but it maybe is also, it's almost a tool to help you understand where you're not focusing. Because it almost seems like you're really more acutely aware of, hey, I'm not spending the time in the stuff that brings values to others. Is that true?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Because I can be, and I have been super busy. I could tell anybody, oh my God, I'm so busy. Look at all this stuff I have to do. And then I did that stuff, but does that stuff matter, in a month? Not really. So,
what I love about this conversation is I'm talking to this recording artist who I would have never thought like this way, because these things that you're talking about is like in the professional corporate world, I hear this kind of stuff all the time. It's being mindful and this deep thinking. I've never heard it in that deep work, but I've heard it in other similar sort of styles. It's interesting to see the application of, we all are trying to find the space and where we can do like the valuable work, the stuff that matters, the stuff that we actually really want to do, not the work that keeps us all busy, because we can always be busy. Yeah. So I think it's really interesting. I was like, this kind of blew me away a little bit. I'm like, really? You think about that? Like, like I was like, aren't you just producing music? Like, I mean, like how naive of that is of me. But it's interesting, and actually, it's almost I don't know, like helpful to understand that these sorts of things go back and forth no matter where you're at in your kind of career, industry, profession, because I think we can probably learn from each other. Because I bet you people that aren't musicians listening to this probably was like, oh, what is this thing I should try to focus, like the non-distraction, super important.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow, that's interesting. Hey, well, let me ask a little bit about then this balance in your world as well, since we're kind of on this theme. So, you're married. I know you have a couple kids, and you obviously you're producing your own music. You are mastering other people's music with a company of your own. What does balance look like for you? Like, how do you maintain that a little bit? Is it part of this, like, you're just really good with the structure and about allowing time at certain areas, or is there another kind of simple plan that you use?
Well, okay, so yeah, now it makes sense to kind of explain the day to day. So the way I'm doing it now is I have kind of a daily checklist, I call it, and it starts off with the kind of obvious stuff you got to do. Like for me, meditate It's 20 minutes. I'm up. I do it. I've almost hit a 180-day streak now.
Wow.
Yeah. So whatever, that's easy. 20, and then straight into exercise, which I would just say running, except I'm, almost recovered from an injury. So I've tried to be more inclusive and say exercise now instead of running. Like I rode my bike 17 miles this morning, which only takes a little over an hour. It sounds so much further for a runner to say 17 miles, but
It does.
yeah, but so, exercise for an hour, log my exercise, and I got to do my little rehab exercises. So, practice voice, is something I hadn't been doing for years. And I've never been a great singer, but I certainly can be better. I've never really mastered that instrument the way I feel that I have with the piano.
Yeah.
And with the voice, if I mastered the instrument, you could tell the difference. With the piano, I could play everything that I could play on one of my albums, like before I even went to college and start, it's not hard. So voice, if I have any mastering, I do that for 20 minutes. Okay. So, and then, I've got my whatever that big thing is for the day, hopefully the deep work. I have a big square around that to fill in that little box with whatever that's going to be. And then, and that after dinner, then is kind of try to relegate that to replying to emails and social media, and scheduling any social media updates for the next day. So, but anyway, to get to your question about the balance, the key thing is this: when I have other stuff come up, family stuff, or like this interview, which is great, and it's not like I have a firm structure to the day. I just go down the list, and if I only get through exercise and then other stuff takes over, and I can't get to that voice, then I don't feel guilty about it because I've put the most important things at the top of that list, and I just work through it. So that's a 7-day-a-week list. So if it's the weekend and there's nothing really much going on, or if there's nothing going on in the morning, I'm going to go through it. I'm going to get up the same time at 6:15 in the morning, and I'm going to work through the same stuff. And the only difference is that on most weekends that, I'm not going to make it very far into that list, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I don't know if you call that balance, but I kind of let the day balance itself.
But it's true, but you also put a priority in these things. So it sounds like, there are some things that are you really stick with, and then there are other things it sounds like there's more flexibility on some of that stuff as well. But you do have a structure, right? It isn't just let's see how the day takes me. That makes sense, though. I think for anybody, like, if you want to produce something or do stuff or make stuff priority, you have to prioritize what you're focused on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's jump in a little bit to because that just makes me think about, you've just released this new album, Adjustments, and I know I've heard this from you as we talked before, and I've read this online too. You thought you were going to release this in like 2 years. You were hopeful in 1 year, and then it took you many more years after that to do it. I'm curious about that. Is this let's talk a little bit about the album itself too. Tell me a little bit about Adjustments, and then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to that.
Sure. Well, so the plan was from the beginning, I was inspired by Robin. She had her Body Talk album, and it was released in 3 parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, and then the album. And I really liked that structure. And so, but I tweaked it a little bit. The way I did it was 3 EPs. Each EP had 5 original songs. One was a Barry Manilow cover, but 5 songs from me.
That just seems so random that you just said
kind of random.
I know, but I love that. That's awesome.
So 5 songs from me, and then 5 remixes, one of each of those songs. So each EP was 10 tracks.
Yeah.
And then and then for the album, I would take the best 10 or 11 tracks. I ended up with 11, and that would be the album. And so. So the album is almost like a greatest hits over the last few years, unfortunately, because it took so long. But and at first, I got the first one done. It wasn't, I don't know, it's more than a year, but I had an excuse because that's when I I had to do I did the songs for Just Dance, the game. It's Just Dance Kids 2014, and so I was producing some music for that, and that was very involved, and I was kind of on their schedule, and
Yeah.
so, and I was still producing music, and so I produced those three other tracks that if you were to include those, my per track output over time wasn't looking too bad, but after that, I guess things just fell apart. It's hard to say. I wasn't playing video games or anything during the day. I don't know what happened, but
Well,
it took 6 years. Yeah.
yeah. Well, my question to that too is like, now that you reflect, now that it's out, and all your fans are listening to it and stuff, is there something you wish you knew before, like you started to work on that, maybe that three kind of like EP approach, or is there something you'd go back and say, hey, I would do this a little differently so it wouldn't take me so long, or I would structure it differently?
Well, I guess I don't know if the structure worked that well. Okay, so here's what really did suck up a lot of my time was the remixers, soliciting remixes, getting, and then what would happen is they'd send me the remix and I would offer mix suggestions. And so my kind of professional mastering self, that kind of bleeds over. And so I'm offering a lot of suggestions. And so with some of the remixers, I probably spent as much time on back and forth, not demanding changes, but just, they're open to my suggestions, and then it becomes kind of a dialogue and more of a collaboration. I probably spent as much time on some of those as it would have taken to record my own new song. And so I think, and I don't think that any of the remixers, now some I really enjoy working with and would easily call friends at this point. So establishing those relationships is awesome. But from a promotional standpoint, I didn't work with anybody that brought new fans to my music that I know of. So in retrospect, maybe the whole remix angle, and I'm not sure my fans really care for remixes that much. I know I've never been really a remix guy. I know that I guess a lot of them are the type that'll buy a new, every Depeche Mode single, even though it just has a remix on it. The same album track they already have. But that was never me. I didn't care about that. If it had a B-side, I'd buy it. If it didn't, I didn't care. But so maybe just focusing on originals could have been better. Like if I had just taken the structure and it had been 3 EPs of 4 tracks each, originals, that would have been pretty quick. And then of course that would have been the album. But then the question is, well, why have an album if it's just the same stuff?
Yeah.
And so the answer to that this time was, well, why have an album? Because it's on CD, dun, 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 and it's like the best songs. And of course I tweaked them a little bit because stuff was bugging me over the years. So I tweaked them and remastered it to sound a little better. But so ultimately the album was more of a celebration of the EPs than it is a standalone, product.
That's a great way to look at it. And I've seen people online write back to you about this album too. It's interesting because you mentioned that, you tweaked it, things that were bugging you. I've actually seen people write things like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And it was people that knew the EPs before and they knew the music, but they really loved some of the changes you made. I'd seen multiple comments about that.
Isn't it funny? So the people who were most likely to buy the CD were the ones who already had all 3 EPs. So
yeah, that is interesting. I wonder about this connection. And that makes me think about. I wanted to bring this up as well, so it's a perfect segue. I think of you, especially it's not just music, but just for somebody because you're not signed by this big organization. Like you don't have this giant contract with like a Warner Brothers Music or things like this. You're doing it on your own. And I think that's the power of all the story. And that's why I love talking about how you spend your time, this deep work. And that's why I think I'm so curious about how you structure this. But the other layer, which if people don't know you, they don't know that you're also this like king of like self promo on social media and this connection with the fans. Like you're good at this. You've had interviews in the past that talked about how you did this. And that's why I can follow online and see what these fans say. And there is a deep connection for these folks that follow you. I wonder if you could describe a little bit about, like, we've talked offline just about, how we do social and what that looks like. But could you kind of describe about what you really focus on, not like the mechanics of it, but why social is so important, or what's the connection like, and how do you build that on your own to produce and share your music?
Yeah, that's a tough question because that's always changing. So I've always told people if I didn't have to be on social media, I wouldn't. I don't use Facebook like a normal person.
Like a normal person. You mean you don't share like all these random memes?
Right. Well, I mean, I just think to check in on friends and family. I mean,
Yeah.
I do see that stuff sometimes because Facebook's smart enough to feed it up to me. But yeah, I don't know. For me, there are so many frustrations with the system. Occasionally, there are those really rewarding interactions that, the engagement where I can, where I've got like 2.2 million followers on Twitter now.
Yeah.
And there's probably less than 100 that we correspond on a regular basis. They reply. I remember who they are. I remember our history. You know what I mean? It's so funny. And I think that has to do with, kind of the study of social groups, right? I think we're limited about 150 total in our life anyway.
Well, it's true. I can't even imagine that you would even remember, 2.2 million people. I think that just goes to the massive stuff if you're going to have a regular interaction.
Yeah, well, and the incredibly low percentage of actual engagement on these forms of social media, especially Twitter, where the tweet, you tweet it and then it's gone. And then if somebody logs in 2 hours later, they're not going to see it. So,
but what's the importance of, I'm just curious about, like, what's the importance of this? Not just the, maybe the connection piece, but for you as somebody producing your original music, how has social become important for you to get your music out there?
Well, it's pretty much the only way. I mean, email, a lot of my fans are still tied to email and won't do social media, which is, like I said, what I would probably be doing otherwise. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I mean, it's kind of it's the only way to share the journey. The day to day, the progress. I think nowadays people aren't really interested in a song unless they're invested. Like if it was just, hey, everybody, I've got a new song. Yeah, people would check it out. But the people that are really interested are the ones who, heard that 3 different versions of the first 8 bars of the verse that I tried and, couldn't settle on. They want to see how it turned out. I think that is a lot more powerful, or they see me playing the part in on my little Rolly, and that's the hope, is that by taking them along for the ride, that we're all a little more invested. They're more invested, they care more, and I'm more accountable because now I need to deliver on what I said I was going to do.
I saw an article a few weeks ago that talked about that we've moved on, like social media when it first came out was like information share, push, share these things. And now with like the Snapchats and the videos, it's really turned into experiences and this is what the article spoke about. And I absolutely kind of agreed to that. And I thought, absolutely, because I want to know the story, the in-depth. For me, it builds a better connection because now with social, the barriers are lower to where we're at about finding and discovering music and any kind of thing. And so to your point, we were like, if I release a song, like who cares? Like it's another song. Yeah. And it's not about, I don't think that's about the artist specifically, unless I'm following them. It's about, there's so much of it as a consumer that I have to, like something has to catch me. And so when you do produce like the video of the Rolly and things like that, like I get engaged because I'm like, wait, what is this? I've never seen this thing. And I feel like I'm actually sitting there with you a little bit. So I wonder if there's the truth of that. The social brings the experience to life and I get to know not just the song, but I get to know more about you. Do you think that there's truth in that?
I do. And so this is where it's difficult for me is I think the people that succeed in this kind of environment are the kind of oversharers that are,
Mm.
that have the camera facing them on Snapchat, and every picture they're in it. And see, I think that's why I don't even bother with Instagram, because I know what people want is they want to see you, whether you're an attractive person or not. They want to see you engaged in what you're doing. And I've always been more private than that. So
Mm.
there's been a kind of a barrier for me to, to doing those kind of things. Like, I've done some tutorial videos, for example, on mixing, but I'm not in the picture. I'm not on camera because I always look goofy on camera. So I don't really, I just, that's another question. It's kind of like the other struggle was, right. Do I need to be listening to music to have influence? Do I need to keep up with the
Mm.
market? The
Yeah.
other one is, do I need to be the product? Do I need to be the brand?
Mm-hmm.
The purist in me, of course, wants it just to be the music, but I know even for me, my engagement in whatever it is online is more about understanding the person and their motivation, and not about the product itself. And so I still struggle with that, and I probably will continue to.
I think from this side, it looks like you, even though it may be a struggle, I love that you actually shared that, because that feels like that's even a deeper connection than most people probably would know about you. Because online, I think it looks like you are super engaged and you have it all figured out. I think that's the secret of the whole world. Nobody has anything figured out. We all just
Right,
we all just kind
right.
of fake it, which is
I feel that imposter syndrome right when you say that stuff. Yeah.
I just love that you said that, because I feel that most of my life. I'm like, I'm
Right.
so faking this. But I'm curious, what was, because I think you are onto something here, like, because you're doing actually a really great job on it from our end, from the consumer, and it's engaging. I'm interested. So for somebody who, is in your shoes, producing music or any other industry, if they are like you and they're like, yeah, I don't really want to do all that, but what's your advice for somebody to like still be involved, but find their limit, or what is that like to still do it well, but still, keep to themselves or whatever the case is?
I guess, yeah. I mean, that is promising that you think it's still engaging, because I think it could be stronger if I were, a little more. I mean, to take it to an extreme, if I had a fight with my wife and I wrote about it, the stuff like that, where people's personal struggles, I think that's where people can really connect and engage with. Where, of course, I feel like, of course, that would be personal.
Yeah.
So how to find? I guess you look for something that you would be comfortable sharing and build a story around that. And for me, that's part of why this Roly keyboard was kind of, I thought, a good idea, because that would be something that I could share with people, that they could see and connect with, and I don't need to have my face on there talking about it necessarily.
So is it really just like an understanding what you're comfortable, like understand your limits, but know that you can still participate?
I think that's it, but I think also, coming from somebody who maybe isn't taking this advice that strongly, but I think you do need to push those limits. And of course, it depends on what your limits are. I mean, some people have, I think, very unrealistic fears about their privacy that aren't warranted. Like, for example, my social media manager might follow somebody on Twitter, and then I get an email from them saying, "Hey, do I know you? Why are you following me?" And my thought is, well, I actually don't know necessarily why I'm following you, but it is a public platform, and you've set your account to be publicly visible. I don't know. It's interesting. Like, what, are you posting things that I shouldn't know about? I don't.
I think that's because, we all have different perspectives of how we use social.
Right.
Like you mentioned earlier, like Facebook, you don't use it like the normal person, friends and family. I think some people don't use it that way at all, actually, anymore. And in Instagram, it's about beauty and art in different ways, but some people don't look at it that way either. They're like, it's more my food channel. So I think there's different ways to look at it. So it's a valid point, for sure. I'd love to just because we didn't really talk about your past. You mentioned a little bit about, the concert pianist, like you were learning these things in school, and so I would just love to know, like, not the whole, because I know it'll take you probably, we went through years of like how do you even get where you got today, but it's more about how did you, like, even just from school to I'm going to be a recording artist, like what was that about? Like what was the trigger?
Oh, I already knew that.
Okay.
Yeah, I already knew I wanted to make records, so I just picked a very impractical route to doing that, I guess. In retrospect, had I known, I just didn't really know about my options. Had I had a guidance counselor at school, there probably was one, right? Maybe I would have, something like Berklee College of Music in Boston would have been the perfect vehicle. And I think it probably would have shaved 5 or 10 years off my learning curve.
Is that then, is that even an advice that you would offer somebody who's trying to, think about this, is like, hey, pick a specialty or get, some kind of guidance or influence from others that like mentor you on the way?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Some type of mentor would be great. Like I think, for example, I had a piano/songwriting student who I encouraged to go to Berklee, and he barely got in on his guitar skills. he was, and he's doing great. He works for a music publisher. He's creating original music that's on TV. So I mean, it really paid off for him. I don't think he would have known about it if not for me. So I didn't have anybody like that really, and I think I felt, I should stay close to home. And so, I went to this Cal State school that was 20 minutes from my parents' house. And so I think that was kind of part of it too. So yeah, I think, and the idea of mentorship extends past that for me. I also regret trying to figure out both mastering and, making records on my own. It's a lot easier today with YouTube videos and stuff, but to guide you. But the smart thing to do would have been to just intern at a local studio and, serve people coffee and clean up the floors for a few weeks. But you know what I mean? But to really get that hands-on experience, because I tend to pick up things quickly, and especially if there's some kind of food chain, like an organization like that, I tend to be really competitive and want to rise to the top. So if I'd had that kind of structure, I think that would have been really valuable for me. So, yeah, I mean, and like I said, these days fortunately, there's a lot of great advice online and communities, even if it's, finding a Reddit community for your particular interest. I think those seeking out guidance from people who have been there and done that can be super valuable.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting that you even say that you would regret looking back, like I should have done these things, which I reverse that into like great advice for others as well.
Yeah.
But now that you have gone through all that, because, it is tough to learn on your own, especially because we make a lot of mistakes or it takes us longer. Sometimes though, I wonder like, well, you know what, it was an evolution, and like, it just didn't happen, or I wasn't in the right place for it, or it wasn't available, and we are where we are. Thinking about that now, and that you have all this experience, like, and because you split your time between, mastering, recording your own music, like what's like next for you? Not meaning like, oh, there's an evolution, but meaning you have this new album out, you are still mastering, thinking about the album format. Is it about more original music, continuing this artistic career, more mastering?
I feel like making my original music is kind of the most important thing for me, professionally.
Yep.
By professionally, I mean out of everything except for, of course, family, so out of everything I do in my life as an individual, I feel like it should be the most important thing. And that's what I should be spending most of my time doing if I'm ultimately going to create something of any lasting value. That the potential hopefully this doesn't sound egotistical, but I feel like I haven't spent the time that I would need to spend to know if I can produce anything that's a lot better. You know what I mean? Like I
Oh,
haven't,
I don't think
I
that's
feel like there's
egotistical at
untapped
all.
potential.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
no,
Well,
I think that's really smart because you're really just questioning, like, yeah, like I really got to spend the time to see what it's almost like pushing yourself, right?
yeah. Yeah. I just think, I feel like, well, wow. Like, I put out this record. I'm happy with it. If I didn't make music myself, it's something I would want to listen to.
Mm,
Um, so I think that's an important kind of, first bar, and I'm very picky, obviously, in what I listen to. But at the same time, if I'm this distracted where it takes 6 years to put this out, what can a year or 6 months of truly focused effort, what can that produce with the amount of experience I have behind me already in the kind of the technical and aspects of making music? What am I capable of? And I feel like, I'm getting older, and that so when I look back at those things that maybe like Berkeley or interning in a studio, I just feel like those things could have put me where I am now a little earlier. I mean, technically, of course, I'm sure that's not true, but um, so it's kind of like now or never is kind of my feeling. Like I
mm,
really need to, like the mastering is great. It works into my schedule beautifully because that's not something you can do 8 hours a day. You just,
no.
yeah, it's not the intense concentration. It's just the keeping your perspective and keeping your ears fresh. There's no way to do it. So
Yeah.
if I do that a couple hours a day, well, maybe it's 3, 4 hours a day total with the logistical stuff and communicating with clients, but actually, hearing music 2 hours a day, that's plenty.
Yeah, I would imagine that's the same for anybody. Like I heard this conversation the other day about editors, movie editors, and I think the same thing. Like after a while, you just can't sit in that dark room anymore. I want to go back to that before I forget it. You had mentioned like it's a now or never moment, sort of.
Yeah.
Like hey, I love that kind of that because that we really focus on like following your passion, finding your purpose, doing things like that. And I am a big believer of it never matters when you figure that out or what that looks like. And even if you knew it, what's your new focus or concentration? Like, do you have any thoughts or an advice now that you've talked like going in the back, you could have done these things. You would advise people to, get this kind of mentorship and whatnot. So thinking kind of in that reference, like knowing this now or never moment, like, is there any advice or any things that you think about of like maybe discovering that now or never moment or realizing it, like, because you meditate, you do these different things. I just think about how like you're in such a clear spot. Any advice to like getting to that clear spot about your now and never moment?
Oh boy, that's tough. I don't know. It's for me. I think when you've got you're in school and you've got your report to do, and it doesn't come together until kind of the last couple days because now you've got that deadline to focus you.
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of what I'm feeling with, like, there's always this kind of ageism in music where, like I'm already too old to be relevant, really. You know what I mean?
I actually do, but
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit of, I mean, I get it, but I still a little bit in our head.
Right.
I think if you were also signed to a giant record company or something, maybe that could be even more true because it's like the Hollywood thing, right? Are you too old for this
Yeah.
part? Whatever. But you have kind of your own fans and market as well. So
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of doing my own thing, and there's no, I would think that I should be able to put out the best music I've ever put out. I mean, I've got, you know, yeah, again, I go back, I think about like I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, the Ninth Symphony and the composers. I mean, those guys who really made music their life and had that deep focus to produce this incredible body of work, which that's kind of what I'm about. I just want to have a body of work I can be proud of.
mm,
Those guys, it was linear. Their growth was linear, right? It's not like they peaked and then, it's not like I went to the Cure like a few weeks ago and, I probably listen to The Cure more than any other band, even Depeche Mode. And they play stuff from a later album, like, I don't even know that song. What's that? What that? Why should it be that way? You know what I mean? There's no
Yeah.
reason. So you look at these classical composers, and and Beethoven, their greatest works are at the end, and they didn't become irrelevant because they got older. And again, not to put myself at that level, but theoretically, there's no reason why this should be a peak. It
Yeah,
shouldn't.
and that makes sense. And it does sound also though like you were kind of referencing it's the time, it's this maybe ageism. Is it even a moment in life? Because I look at things of like the older we get, I think the more we start to realize that it's a finite time that we have on this planet.
Yes.
But there's also, and we talked to a guest, Tony Thuray, a while ago, who's a filmmaker, and he talked a little bit about his daughter was his kind of ticking clock. As she was getting older, he was starting to have these moments of, oh crap, like if I'm going to do it, I got to do it now. Like he quit his creative director role and he was like, no, I'm just going to make independent film now because if I'm going to do it, I need to do it. And are there moments like that for you that you start to look around and say, okay, yeah, I got to focus now because there's like I'm not getting any younger or things like that?
Yeah, for me, I was going to mention the kids. The kids growing is more of an opportunity for me because
Mm,
you know what I mean. They don't require as much
right. Yep. Yep. Well, younger kids require
minute to
more.
minute care.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They're 10 and 13 now, and so theoretically we can. It used to be that that if I did not participate with them in whatever they were doing. Well, and I guess this is still somewhat the case. I mean, my son is just going to watch YouTube. You know what I mean? And but I think it's reaching a point where I won't need to be guiding them every
Yeah.
spare minute of the day that they're at home with me. And so there's an opportunity there, and there's a freedom, you know, financially, kind of with this is kind of a now or never time because everything has come together to give me the space to do this. And if I don't, then I'm going to feel really stupid.
I do love though that your perspective is really different where it was not about they're getting older, gosh, I gotta do stuff. It was the opportunity. It's I love that you just said, hey, you were aware of there's more opportunity here to do these things. Well, that's super smart. I love that when you can start to realize, that you have a moment, and don't let the moment go by.
Right. And I'm hoping, that bringing it back to the logistics of kind of social media and promotion, all that kind of stuff. I'm hoping that this time, I was looking at, I don't know if I mentioned it by name specifically when we talked before, but looking at kind of Patreon, something like that, where people can support me on a per work basis. And then that takes care of the social media there because that's its own platform. So I can really engage with the people that have chosen to be involved in what I'm doing, engage directly, and then get more feedback and back and forth from them to kind of shape what I'm doing and to hold me accountable. And then it takes away that idea of this monumental project I'm working towards, which an album always is. Now it's just, wow, let's see where this takes us. And here's my progress on this. And even if it doesn't evolve into a finished work, I mean, that's okay too. I can just, they don't have to pay anything for it. And then there's still they can see how even those discarded ideas later turn up in something that hopefully is greater than, what it started at the beginning. So
I like that you brought that up, the Patreon piece. It's really smart. I've seen a lot of creators, meaning it could be music, it could be film, podcasting. I see different folks using that, and I've vacillated back and forth about like, like for me, like, is that something we want to do? Is it not? And this funny thing is because there are a couple of people I follow through that platform as well that are musical artists in Los Angeles, or one's in LA. And it's interesting too, because I have more of intimate connection with that person because they are posting things that are a little bit more unique. Because if you're a Patreon, supporter, I can have some more of that. And it's not like I'm trying to like have a Real Housewives moment with this person. It's not like I'm trying to be that intimate in that. It's more about, oh, I get to be part of the creative journey with you. So I actually really enjoy that. And for the folks that don't know, it's, you can pay, I think you set it up, but you can pay per different methods per, per work or
per month
or per month or right. So I find that, it's put my money where my interest is versus let people just spatter stuff at me, but I can pick the people that I really love and help them produce great stuff because I want to enjoy it. So I think there's some smart, if you do try that, I'll be really interested. Cool. I'm sure that you would post something about it.
I almost certainly will try it. There is a little bit of a danger that's kind of over the hype hump, and that people, you know what I mean? Like that kind of got a bit of press a while ago. And I want to have some finished new works to be able to offer before I set that up. So it may be, and then that also, what works against me is that not wanting to be, on camera begging for money type thing.
That is a funny thing, because I kind of feel a little like that. I think that's my vacillation of, what makes me feel weird to be like, hey, you should pay for this.
Right. Has it really come to this? Yeah.
But I guess it's really different. People have Kickstarter campaigns all the time for things. And what's so different about this? So, wow. What I really loved about our conversation today is, because I think, originally when I didn't know you and we hadn't talked before, you're this musical artist producing great music, and I've really enjoyed just this connection and journey I see online. But after the conversation, I also know like you're you really think, and you're analytical and smart about the way that you produce things, share things, balance life, because it's more than just I'm a creative artist. Like you said, like these people in a band and they just want to have gigs. Right. I think to me, it's like it's like this unique special. Like if you're going to produce music or do something creative, you can be all in, but you can be all in a unique way or in your way. And I think you were kind of an example of that. You can still be married, have kids, do this, other stuff, and you can still think about deep work. It's a little bit of a thank you of sharing this, because I've just a little surprised in such a good way of, so I'm not so crazy, because I feel like I'm kind of this boring dude outside of all this that's just like goes hiking and does normal things. So I don't know. It's been really interesting and I think insightful conversation, Brian, to just listen to you talk about the stuff behind the scenes about this music career. So thanks for doing that.
No, it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, I know with musicians, what I always get told is, dude, you gotta tour. What, you're not making money? You got to tour. Like there's this kind of boilerplate, and I'm just not going to do that stuff. So it is interesting, but I am cognizant of perhaps the sacrifices that I make, the financial sacrifices, or I should say the potential that I lose by not being willing to do certain things, by kind of doing it on my own terms.
But
I'm okay with that.
Right. And I think it's, when you say sacrifice, it's interesting. I think of it as, maybe you're sacrificing that element, but you're actually making an intentional choice because you find value in your family and the life that you have there, as well as the balance of probably meditation, the running. Like if you were on tour and doing all that stuff, you wouldn't be able to do all of that. So life is about making the intentional choices for yourself. So I think it's more about, you're putting weight somewhere else. So and the positive about that is, no matter who you are, you can still make those choices and still do the passion that you love. You don't have to do it as prescribed by others.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for the folks that have been listening and want to follow you online, what are the best places to find you?
Well, Twitter, as we talked about, is kind of my primary social network. But only, I believe, 13% of adults are on Twitter.
Yep.
So if you're not on Twitter, of course, I'm on Facebook as well. And I'm always, you can message me. I will message back. It may take a few days. Colortheory.com is my website. And I'm on pretty much every social network as Color Theory, one word. But Twitter is the place for right now until this Patreon thing kind of happens. Twitter is the kind of place where I'm at every day.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So we'll link to that. And I know that on your website too, that's cool. You even offer some different blog posts and different updates and whatnot. So we'll make sure that we, link to everything. But yeah, I think that interaction, it sounds like a lot of it's on Twitter. Even if you're not on Twitter, you can find you somewhere else.
Right. And even if you're not on Twitter, you can still, for example, I had mentioned I don't use Facebook like normal people. Well, if there's someone I want to keep track of, I just bookmark their page. And then I've got this whole folder of bookmarks that I check out every Friday. And so that's my way to keep up on things without feeling like I need to be part of some network that I don't want to be part of.
That is so interesting. Okay, I feel like I'm going to do some follow-up thing with you at some point and write down like the 10 tips of or ways to do or use these tools, because I think you use them in kind of a unique way. So I think there's probably something there. I'm going to bug you down the road and pick your brain.
I'm sure the 10 things that I would say now will be different than the 10 things that will come up down the road. So
yeah, probably,
because it's always changing. But it's fun to find little hacks. So
this is awesome. Well, thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So much fun. All right, we'll talk soon.
All right, sounds good.
Now, over to you. Any thoughts or questions you'd like to share? Seriously, do you have any questions you'd like to ask me or the guest? We'll answer them and even get the guest to help us. So send us a message, use our Facebook page and email us there, or post a comment or question on the page, or tweet us at accidental.info using hashtag #livingyourjourney. You can find out more about all the guests, links to their sites and social channels, and even bonus content all at accidentalinformation.com. Now, a couple favors. Go subscribe to the show and you'll be the first to get the download before everyone else. Also, take just a couple moments and head over to the show in iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a quick review. Quick, easy, and I would love it. This totally supports us and it helps me bring in interesting guests each week and keeps the show going. Also, I love to read them and see what you guys are really thinking. Thanks for joining the conversation, and remember, Living Your Journey is available every Tuesday. Until next week.